Well, hello and welcome to the Market Musings podcast here, where today our guest, Dennis Edmonds, who is the CEO of Kazera Global, is joining us for the first time. Looking forward to having a chat with you. Dennis, how are you doing?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. I'm looking forward to having a chat with you.
Indeed. Well, I'm just trying to think when we first met. I think it was at the Momentous event in London, which was probably 2 years ago or so. I think that was the first time we met, wasn't it?
It probably was, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. There's not been an event since then, but maybe there'll be another one this year. I don't know. We'll see how things go. But I mean, yeah, on the Market Musings podcast, it's more about the people within a business. So I'm just quite keen to get a bit of a understanding of where you've come from. Of course, working with Kazera Global now, it's a mining exploration company. We've talked a few times on Stockbox about the different projects that the company has and how things are going. But I mean, if you were to just perhaps, I don't know, if you want to go back a little bit and perhaps go back to where you go back as far as you want, really, where you sort of grew up or where you went to university, things you studied, early career, and I'm just keen to get a bit of an understanding as to your history, really. So if I can sort of hand over to you to start off, and I'll come in with some questions.
Okay, well, sort of going back in the midst of time, I
Indeed.
was I was born in South Africa, grew up in South Africa in Johannesburg.
Yeah.
Um, Went to university at the University of Witwatersrand, did a law degree,
Okay.
um, and then did my national service for a couple of years, and then after that ended up fairly shortly afterwards becoming a partner in a law firm. And then set up my own law firm with another partner. Um, Sold my interest in that after a few years, ran another law firm, and decided that it was the opportune time to move to the UK for bigger opportunities and different opportunities.
Okay.
Um, and so, and I'd also met my wife, who was very keen on living back in England. She'd been to university here.
Mm.
And so we decided to move to England. And the one thing that I promised myself was that I would never practice law again.
Okay.
Um, I got to England, and the only job I could get was as a lawyer. So
Yeah. Okay.
I, I ended up being a lawyer again
Okay.
for a period of time. I was an equity partner in a firm in the southeast for a number of years, and then moved on from there into essentially a private equity type fund, and from there into various listed companies and private investments, and ultimately to Kazera. So yeah, that's the
Okay.
the long story short.
So it was law then, really. So that's what you studied. That's what you got your degree in there. So clearly, obviously, that was an interest for you at the time. But what happened? Did you just get a bit bored of it?
Yeah, when you're doing deals for other people and you're making things happen for other people the whole time, well, I certainly had a hankering to be doing it for myself instead.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, one of the problems with law is you selling hours,
Mm.
and that's a hard way to make a living, an unpleasant way to make a living in lots of respects for me.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, since then I've had to instruct numerous law firms, and I've had a pleasure of working with some really great lawyers. So it's been really nice to be on the other side.
Yeah. Indeed. Indeed. But I mean, you started. You say you started two law firms and then sold both of
Well,
them.
I started one.
One.
The other one was an existing firm, well-established firm.
Okay.
They needed a managing partner, and
Okay.
offered me the position, and with a view to actually essentially selling it. So I got involved in that there, and yeah, sold it, and then moved to the UK.
Okay. And what sort of area of law was it?
They were both quite general. Neither of them were mining law.
Mm.
Certainly, the biggest transaction we did in the firm I started was a banking transaction in South Africa, getting a license for a new bank that had never not been done in South Africa for a number of years because of
Mm.
sanctions, and lack of people's willingness to invest in South Africa.
Mm.
So it was a big transaction for us as a fairly small law firm. It was a very unusual transaction in that, as I say, a license hadn't been granted to a new bank in South Africa for probably 6 or 7 years at that time. And yeah, we got a provisional license, and then the one of the investors, which is in a foreign country, started mis-selling shares, and the whole thing kind of collapsed. But from the legal point of view, it was a great success for us. Sadly, from a business perspective, in terms of the bank actually getting into operation, it didn't work because of their actions. But yeah, as I say, good for the law firm, good for me in terms of experience and international exposure. But it's also a great experience. It gives you an enormous discipline in terms of analyzing problems. It gives you an enormous amount of practice and skill at overcoming problems and working out what the way. Once you know what the goal is, working out how you're going to get there. I was always very goal focused as a lawyer, and I remain very goal focused as CEO of a company. I want to make sure that what I see as the end goal is achieved, and I have very clear ideas on terms of how we're going to get there. And as in anything, life throws up roadblocks that you don't expect. But I think years of experience of dealing with problems and not being overwhelmed by them, and finding solutions, has stood me in good stead. It's South Africa is a challenging environment. If you think you're going to simply go out to South Africa and get a license and mine and make lots of money, you should probably think once again. It's not going to happen.
Well, I mean, this presumably is very good experience that you can now apply to Kazera. I mean, but before we get on to that, was after being the equity partner, then was it? You said it was a private equity. You were in a private equity fund as well.
Yeah, it was a private equity, essentially it's a private equity fund. It was money put in by one guy in particular, and another two of us joined him as partners, and we were involved in a number of different things, including a media company which I ended up running.
Okay.
Which was losing lots of money, and I took over running it, and within a fairly short space of time, it was actually making pretty much the same as it was losing previously. So it was that was a nice, successful outcome, in something again which I had absolutely no knowledge of. My knowledge of media is confined to watching television and reading the newspaper.
So what was the media company then? What were they actually doing?
They were doing film-related content. So this is back in the early days of the internet.
Yeah.
And what they were doing was they were creating content for various internet providers. So just to use a name, not necessarily that they were one of them, but just using a name. MSN have movie pages, and in those days, they would have a team of people creating all their content. And what we were then doing was we were going to interviews, we were getting the publicity media so when a film is released, they put out a pack of media content. We would then edit that content. We would go to interviews or press conferences, and we would conduct interviews, and we would then put together a package which they could then buy from us each month, and we would supply them with all their film content. And by having a focused team just doing film content, whereas obviously they had to cover film and radio and sport and politics and everything else. So our focus was purely film. And we were able to provide them with much deeper and much more detailed content than they could get from the film distributors, for a very realistic price. And then for the film distributors, obviously, it was very good in terms of the fact that they could get us to help to promote their films by doing in-depth interviews or more coverage, or being able to access perhaps would sometimes access filming and get behind the scenes shots that didn't exist and weren't on there or in their standard press pack. So
Okay.
yeah, it was an interesting time, in a positive way.
Indeed, and so there was the media opportunity. That what else did the private equity fund get involved in?
They were involved in a number of things. They were also involved in we had a interest in a company which did video used in military helicopters and things, so to be able to give a picture back to base of exactly what was happening on the ground as they were going into an operation.
Okay.
So yeah.
Was it a lot in sort of that camera sort of media world then in that fund?
It turned out that those were the two sort of major
Okay.
investments. So that's kind of how it turned out. But I don't think that was particularly the focus. Again, though, the focus wasn't on mining. I got into mining because I was in a friend's office, and he turned around and he said something about, you South Africans, you must know about gold mining. Could you look at this? And it was literally that idiotic a conversation that sort of ended up with me becoming involved in mining.
Really? So it was a conversation you had with someone, and then was that what led to Kazera? Then was that company already established, and you were then brought in on the board?
Yeah, no, it was a deal somebody was trying to put together, and
Okay.
I ran it for them. But no, my involvement with Kazera was different. I was a director of a company called Pathfinder Minerals. I left Pathfinder. So Pathfinder had a claim against the government of Mozambique, for illegal expropriation of a license. And we managed to find a fund to fund that claim, and take it over, at which stage I left Pathfinder. But Pathfinder, because that was its sole reason for existence, was looking for something to do an RTO with, or to do a new venture with. And one of the things we looked at was an operation up in the Northern Cape, which was diamonds and heavy mineral sands. It didn't ultimately work for Pathfinder for various reasons. In terms of Pathfinder structure, we couldn't do it. But it was then shown to the board of Kazera, and it was also shown to them on the basis of there's a director of Pathfinder who'd be prepared to come on to Kazera to make these projects work. And I really liked the projects. And the reason for liking them was, firstly, it was an unusual combination. So people tend not to mine diamonds in heavy mineral sands because heavy mineral sands are, as the name says, really heavy. So just to put this in context, the specific gravity of heavy mineral sands is about 4, diamonds is about 3.5. So they're actually, it's really dense, solid material that you're mining in. So that tends to be avoided. At the same time, you couldn't mine heavy mineral sands in the area in which we're mining, because of the fact that there are diamonds in those sands, and all diamonds are owned and protected by Alexco. So diamond miners don't want to mine because of the specific gravity of heavy mineral sands. Heavy mineral sands miners can't mine because of the existence of diamonds. And the concept was to obtain a license to mine diamonds, and then also to get a right to mine the heavy mineral sands. And if you had both of those, then suddenly the problems go away. And instead of you having this enormously difficult and complicated overburden to remove, that overburden on its own becomes a source of profit. And in our case, will be a much bigger source of profit ultimately than the diamonds will be. But it's so it's a wonderful way of running an operation where the overburden, which ordinarily is simply a cost to remove and reinstate, for us becomes a product in its own right. So it was great. Just the idea was really attractive. Kazera saw the benefit of it, offered me a position on the board, which I was very pleased to take, and with the specific role of looking after these two projects, while the current CEO was focused on the operations in Namibia, which was a tantalum project in Namibia.
Okay. And just on heavy mineral sands then, so what could you describe what exactly they are?
Yeah, heavy mineral sands covers a whole variety of things.
Okay.
In our case, the predominant sand is ilmenite. Ilmenite is used in essentially whitening products, so in paint and things like that. It's titanium dioxide. But we also have monazite, rutile, zircon, all of which have a much higher value than the ilmenite does. It exists in much lower quantities, but are used in a range of different industries and have real commercial value. But a lot of them are also radioactive.
Mm-hmm.
So traditionally on the West Coast, we've been based on what other people have been doing, we've been fairly relaxed on the basis that the levels of these high value but low quantity products is very low. In fact, ours turns out to be high enough for us to have a radioactivity issue, which has meant that we've had to then go to the nuclear regulator to get a clearance to handle them, and that means essentially showing that we have processes in place to ensure that our workforce is properly protected, and indeed, as they are transported down to Cape Town, that anybody coming in contact with them in the event of the unlikely event of a spillage or an accident, that people aren't going to suddenly be exposed to unacceptably high levels of radioactivity.
So, I mean, just thinking about what it is, if I'm trying to get a picture of heavy mineral sands, is it minerals that are contained within sand, effectively?
Mark, it almost looks like almost a tar.
A tar. Okay.
A tar, yeah, they are. It's very dense. It's very heavy. And that's part of the whole reason is if you're separating out diamonds, what you do is your sand is fairly light. Your diamonds are heavy. Your diamonds fall down to the bottom. Your heavy sands, your diamonds will be at the top. So the whole diamond process, the ordinary diamond process, has to be put to one side. Really, you have to use something different, a different way of doing this. And that there is really expensive if you're not able to make money out of the heavy mineral sands. If you can make money out of the heavy mineral sands, it turns into being, as I say, just another cost center. Sorry, a profit center, cost center, obviously as well, but ultimately a profit center.
So, I mean, is it difficult so with Kazera then, you've got the heavy mineral sands that contain diamonds. Is it quite challenging to get the diamonds separated?
With the process we're using, it won't be, because what we will be doing is we want to be focusing on the heavy mineral sands. To get the heavy mineral sands, you need to separate out all the lighter elements of it. So the silica, the ordinary sand, needs to be separated out.
Okay.
And then the diamonds are lighter than mineral sands, so they will be separated out as well.
Okay.
So our process will be one where, as we separate out the silica and the diamonds, so we will be separating out our heavy mineral sands. So it's all just part of the process.
Okay. And then what will remain in the heavy mineral sands, and once you've taken out the silicas and the diamonds?
Well, essentially, it'll be a much purer form of heavy mineral sand. So it will then be the ilmenite, the zircon, and the monazite, and the rutile.
Right. Okay.
And garnet. Garnet is also quite a big element. If you just go back to step one, and as you're separating out your silica and your lighter elements, that there's including your diamonds. So now, once again, you've got a situation where you're separating out what would be ordinarily unusable waste product. And in your unusable waste product, you've got a whole bunch of diamonds. And the diamonds that you will typically find in the heavy mineral sands are much more marine type diamonds. In other words, they are bigger diamonds and they are much better quality diamond. So the diamonds that we are anticipating getting out will be high value diamonds compared to the typical diamonds that we get further inland, which are all gem diamonds. Everything on Alex Core's ground pretty much is gemstones, but they are smaller because they've been ground up by the sea and the action of rocks over a much longer period of time before being deposited and becoming a part of a land mass. These here are still pretty much on the edge of the sea, so then they pretty much still sea diamonds. So the diamonds that were part of would have ordinarily been the sand, which would have ordinarily been part of your waste product and just a cost, now contains again a profit element. You then end up with your heavy mineral sands, and that there then would be a mix of ilmenite, monazite, zircon, rutile, and garnet. And the next step from there would be to then separate those out. And because none of these things are written in stone in terms of, well, this is it's not, for instance, like maybe, I don't know, a pure gold or something where it is what it is. These here contain various elements, and as a result, the level of magnetic attraction changes, but also so does their weight and their level of radioactivity. So it's all a bit of a movable feast. It's a question of getting that fine line between a pure ilmenite cutoff and having as much of the other products separated out to go in their various directions. And ultimately, the magnetic separator will end up separating those there out, and we will end up with a number of different products coming through ready for bagging.
Right.
So monazite will be there, the zircon will be there, the rutile will be there, the garnet will be there, and obviously the ilmenite will be there.
Yeah. So Kazera's remit on this project is to separate all the minerals there and then sell them to market independently.
Yeah, Mark, once we've got to the purity on the ilmenite, it is possible that we will simply stockpile the balance until either we are ready to separate it ourselves, or until we have a third party who want to do it with us, and we might just sell it like it is.
Okay.
But that is the radioactive element. So the stockpiling on its own
And that's
means that the procedures we'd have to follow. But the discussions we've had with off-takers on the ilmenite side and on the heavy mineral sand side generally have been along the lines of, well, would they be prepared to fund the magnetic separator? And indications from three of the four that was, well, actually more than four now, but three of the sort of four front runners is that they would be happy to do that. And then obviously we would pay for the cost of the magnetic separator over a period of time out of sales of product. So it's very much a win-win situation for us, because what it would mean is that we're beneficiating the product, we're selling a purer product, which means you get a better price for it. And at the same time, it means that we're not putting our investors' money into more capital equipment.
Yeah. Okay. And then on the diamond side, are you able to extract them? I know you mentioned before that there's some laws around that.
So what we chose to do a long time ago, was to simply accumulate our gravel in safe stockpiles. Again, accumulating gravel is something you need to be careful about. We had a situation a few years ago, which I did RNS, but where we had gravel being stolen by these illegal diggers, and it was a convoy of, I can't remember, 150 vehicles just descending on our gravel pile one night and loading it up.
Okay.
It's and as I say, with security guards being killed, it's not just a question of, well, oh shame, you've lost some gravel. Our guys' lives are at risk down there, and I'm not prepared to make that worse for them. So what we've done is we've done what we felt we could do safely, or what Johannes felt we could do safely. And with the presence of the army there now, things are definitely changing, and we see some great opportunities developing for us with diamonds. But there are still remain some things that need to be sorted out at Alex Core in terms of the plant, which isn't running properly. And so we've done that by acquiring our own jig, which will enable us to do essentially what the Macelock plant was doing. And this is a jig which is tried and tested. It's been used on De Beers sites over a number of years. I have visited the guy who built it together with our chairman, Gerard Kisby. And so we went up to visit his factory. He's been in business for a long time. He knows exactly what he's talking about. He builds jigs for all kinds of different industries, including diamonds, and for people like De Beers. And that will replace what Macelock was doing. We add to that there a flow sort, and we'll end up in a situation where what we're taking to Alex Core for final, essentially, recovery of actual diamonds will be almost, a 5-gallon paint in size of very, very high concentrate diamond gravel full of diamonds, which is secured obviously at our site of operations. Alex Core will put a permanent full-time security guard on our site, for which we have to pay. But what it means is that we aren't dependent on anybody else. Now suddenly we're in a situation where we can, if we mine gravel in an area where we can't protect it, we can immediately process it and get it down to, as I say, this paint and type size product. That there can be transported easily every single day to Alex Core, where it goes into their secure storage. And it then gets opened the next day with our people present, and Alex Core's people, and Alex Core's security. And Alex Core's security have been absolutely fantastic the whole time that we've been there. They're facing an enormous uphill battle. They can't take on a convoy of 100 and something vehicles. But they have done everything that they can possibly do, and they have been unbelievably supportive in terms of protecting what we're doing, protecting what other contractors are doing, and also making premises available for our heavy mineral sands project, because they, like anybody with their heads and hearts in the right place in the Northern Cape, can see the opportunity that our operations and other successful operations in the area will bring to local people, schools, employment, clinics, all those things. As I say, we're looking at infrastructure in terms of energy and creating alternative ways of generating electricity. So all those things will have a major positive impact on a very small population in a part of South Africa, which is largely ignored because it's a long way away from everything else, and the population is relatively small. It hasn't got a great impact for politicians, but where we think we can make a real difference.
And when do you think you might be getting into that processing then?
Well, the diamonds, we should be certainly producing reasonable volumes by the end of February.
Oh, okay.
We'll be doing some testing and establishment of the thing, but by the end of February we should be producing some reasonable volumes.
Yeah, so end of February, that would be that's quite soon, really.
Well, it is soon, and it's again it's because of the fact that we have this army presence. It's going to enable us to get into areas which we weren't able to get into. And when the army do leave, presuming that they eventually do leave, they will have sorted out the problem. A large number of these Amazonas come from neighboring countries. When I say neighboring countries, not Namibia, funnily enough, because Namibia's got a successful economy of its own, but from countries that don't have successful economies. And the fact that the army has been and clearly is prepared to become involved is going to have a major impact.
And I wonder if we can perhaps just talk about Africa for a little bit. You mentioned earlier about it being a bit of a tricky place to do business in, but I certainly get the sense that that's changed quite a lot, and Africa's potentially got a great future.
It has definitely. I think certainly in those days, because of apartheid, because of sanctions, there was a very strong reluctance to invest in South Africa. The international community made enormous commitments in terms of when South Africa changes and becomes a democratic country, there would be an enormous amount of investment coming in, and South Africa is a country which is rich in resources,
Yeah,
rich in not only natural resources, but also in people resources. People are very resilient in South Africa. They tend to be very independent thinkers. They tend to be good at working out ways to solve problems. So it's a good country to invest in from all those perspectives, and not least, as I say, the mineral wealth. Um, there are issues around regulation and things. South Africa is still a bit of a new democracy. It's obviously had its problems. It has its problems going forward in terms of things like uh, power generation,
mm-hmm.
which is a constant problem in South Africa. So on our mine, we operate from we use diesel generators rather than relying on the national grid, as do most mines in that area. But we don't use an enormous amount of power, so we can get away with doing that. Obviously, if you're running a really big factory, you can't do it on a diesel generator, and it needs to be done on
Yeah.
the grid. So we don't have those problems, which is good for us. We're also in an area, the Northern Cape is an area which has got fantastic sunshine. It's also got quite strong winds quite a lot of the time. So it's
Okay.
a very natural area for both solar and wind generated energy. And it's one of the things that we are working on in conjunction with a couple of other people is to see what we can do in terms of creating that infrastructure in the Northern Cape.
And I mean, when it comes to that kind of thing, we hear a lot about the load shedding, as it's called, isn't it, in South Africa,
It
that
is,
because the
yeah.
energy is not consistent. I mean, what is it like as a place? I mean, where have these problems come from? And what's the government like? Are they sort of proactive in building the country to make it generally a better place and a more functioning environment, but also to encourage outside investment as well into the country?
Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, recently made a declaration that he was going to mining is very important to South Africa, and he was going to take steps to make sure that mines were better protected. South Africa has had a problem for a considerable amount of time with illegal miners who are termed zommers in South Africa, and they have descended on mines and stolen assets and stolen ore and various things. And we've had those problems up in the Northern Cape. There have been a number of incidents. There were a couple of security guards who were buried in sand. One killed, and the other one left alive.
Really? Wow.
To give a warning to other security guards not to get involved with what these guys wanted to do on the mines, which is to basically steal.
Mm.
As a result of Mr. Ramaphosa's statement, what he's now done is he's put the defence force into a number of strategic areas. One of those there being on the Alexander Bay area where we are mining. And in fact, we've got a contingent of about 100 soldiers who are now based on our site, from which we are processing, or will be processing, the heavy mineral sands. And these guys are special force soldiers, and their job is to find and arrest the illegal miners operating in the area. So it's pretty much the Wild West. I mean, this has been an enormous change. It looks to me, and this is a personal opinion, but it looks to me like part of what they're doing will also have more far-reaching implications. It's not just guys who are coming out with a pick and a shovel and stealing some ore or stealing some gravel. When you've got that gravel, somebody's got to buy it from you. Somebody else is probably turning a blind eye somewhere. So it's going to go much further than just the Zomas. It will be There will be, I believe, people within the companies that own the mines who will be implicated, and there will be questions asked of the police, and there will also be a number of arrests around people who have been trading in diamonds or buying diamonds and selling diamonds and other things. It's not only diamonds; it's gold and other wonderful rare earths, wonderful minerals that South Africa has.
The country has, yeah. I mean, do you see? Because I mean, I was talking to I was at the Resourcing Tomorrow conference earlier, well, towards the end of last year, November time, and I met with a few different people. And the feeling I get with regards to South Africa is that I think it got a very bright future. Really, it's an underexplored region, and I think a lot of it's got a very bright future in terms of where certainly, well, the world, but perhaps more Western countries could secure their supply of various critical minerals. I mean, what's your view on the future of South Africa in that regard, in terms of its potential to provide the world with the needs to go down the energy transition route, and of course then, as well as that, not just the prospectivity of South Africa, but of course what the government are doing, what the whole country is like. Is it improving and becoming a better environment to do business in?
Yeah, Mark, I think it is. I think it is slowly. There is an election this later on this year, which people are watching with enormous interest. But whatever happens in that election, South Africa has got so many things in its favor. The mineral resources, sure, but it's also got a really good road and had a very good rail infrastructure. Both of which are relatively easy to reinstate and to bring up to international standards very easily. But even now, traveling around South Africa, as I know you've done, it's so much easier than traveling around almost any other country I can think of in Africa, because of the infrastructure. The other thing that's very much in its favor is it's got a very, very accommodating climate. It generally is pretty dry. It generally has lots of sunshine, and it's got when it does have floods, and sometimes the last couple of years we've had quite a lot of rain in South Africa. The bridges are good. It's just the whole infrastructure and everything else is good. There are also an enormous number of people of all races and descriptions who are really, really committed to seeing South Africa work, and who would love to see the end of those corrupt elements, and just seeing everybody pulling together towards the same common purpose, which is to make South Africa successful, to capitalize on all those resources which you were talking about, and to see it successful, to see a benefit which enables everybody from the poorest to the richest to get proper schooling, proper medical care, proper just all the things that we sort of take for granted a little bit in the Western world, but which really don't exist for a large number of people in Southern Africa or Africa generally.
And Dennis, just to perhaps finish off here, maybe what are some of the things that you personally want to achieve with Kazera? What are your ambitions?
I've seen there are so many mining companies which will be exploration plays forever, and their share price will spike and come down, because ultimately some of them will never get into production, and all they are is a really good story. That isn't my motivation. My motivation is to make sure that the story we tell is not only a good story, but is actually based on money. Okay. For me as an investor, I want to see the company making money and being independent of needing money from outside investors. So that's very much the first goal. There are a number of other opportunities, but in any opportunity that I would like to be involved in, I want to see it as an opportunity to make money, not just and make money by way of turning it into a profitable, money-producing venture. I'm not particularly excited by the concept of investing in things which are pure exploration plays and which I know will never get into production because they're too far away from infrastructure, because they are the resource is just too inaccessible, because the recovery cost of that resource is too high. You can still spin a great story around it in terms of, we've got this resource and it's now we've got an even better chalk resource and all the rest of it. But if you know that it's never going to come into production, that's not something that I want to be doing.
Okay. So are you almost saying you'll be judged on success on a profit level?
Yes.
Okay.
I am. Okay. Yeah, I'm very much focused on bottom line.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, Dennis. It's really good to talk to you. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot more in a more shorter format updates as the company goes forward throughout the year. Certainly, perhaps I'm sure we'll be talking in certainly Q1. Things are going to change quite a lot there at the Heavy Mineral Sands. But thank you very much for your time today, just talking a bit about where you've come from, and I've enjoyed it.
Mark, it's been brilliant. Thank you so much, and I agree with you. It's going to be a lot of really exciting things to talk about in the near future.
Excellent. Thank you for listening to another podcast from Market Musings. Tune in next time.